A massive stroke left Katherine with significant disabilities as a young mom and wife. Yet her persistent pursuit of hope in some very dark times has been an inspiration to tens of thousands of people as they face their own very dark days. She joins us now. Katherine, thanks so much for joining us.
Oh, I'm so glad to be with you.
Well, I love talking with you, and I'm so privileged every time we chat. You know, your life was turned upside down in such a significant way by that massive stroke. Can you just give us a sense of the challenges that you face every day because of it?
Absolutely. As a 26-year-old, I had a massive brainstem stroke out of absolutely nowhere. I had an AVM rupture, which is an arterial venous malformation that was a birth defect that I never knew that I had, that grew in my brain and my brainstem my entire life, and ruptured as a 26-year-old young mom, newly married with a sweet little 6-month-old baby in the next room at the married housing unit at Pepperdine University. And when it ruptured after almost 2 years in hospitals and brain rehabs, I began to walk, talk, eat food again. And slowly I've made an absolutely miraculous recovery. But as you can no doubt see by my paralyzed face, not everything has been completely restored. I live with significant disabilities. I cannot walk on my own unassisted. I cannot drive a car. I have many pretty intense health concerns and various issues, and nothing has been 100% restored to how it was pre-stroke.
And I know, you spent 5 years really in such a dark place, grieving the losses of what you hoped your life would be. And I love the quote that you said, don't put a Jesus Band-Aid on a bullet wound. So talk to me about, why that season of lamenting is so important when you have a life-altering or a suffering experience.
Absolutely. So the first 5 years after the stroke was really a time of grief for my old life. It was a time of really lamenting and processing, and then eventually being able to come up for air and recognize I can do this life even if it's entirely different than I thought it was going to be. And in those first 5 years, which I really like to say loud and clear, 5 years, not the day after tragedy, but in those 5 years of processing, I really allowed my own story to break my heart, which I think is so important. You can't move forward until you felt the weight of it. And once I went there, felt it, I didn't stay there, but I had to start there to ever move forward.
I think that's such an important point, because sometimes we want to just get people to the joy part. We want to get people to the, healed heart or hope or, whatever we think as people of faith that God will provide. But I love that you make the point that grieving is important. And even now, after, Katherine, you've been through so much, you've been diagnosed with undiagnosable neurovascular disorder, which essentially is a non-diagnosis. It's just telling you that there could be more suffering coming. So it feels like you've carried enough. Was that part of your response when you heard that? Like, come on, this is enough already.
Of course, was, haven't I hit my quota? Haven't I been through enough, specifically brain issues? Surely that's not on the list anymore.
Yeah.
But the reality is, until we're at home in heaven, there's no quota on suffering. It can happen again and again and again. But what is so beautiful is that truth of Romans 5:3, that suffering can produce hope. Hope, character, will not disappoint, will not put us to shame. So we get fortified through the suffering to go back into the hope. It propels us forward into the ongoing hope of life, the ongoing hurt, I should say, of life, but with an ongoing hope. through Jesus.
Yeah, you talk about joy disrupting, so that joy isn't just tied to an easy life, but that you can be a joy rebel. Talk to me about that, because I love that, joy rebel. I want to adopt your words.
Thank you. I love this thought. I love the thought that anybody who has a broken body or a broken brain or a broken heart can be a joy disruptor. That we get to rebel against the darkness with joy. That we get to be a part of disrupting the idol, the tremendous idol that joy can only be found in a pain-free life.
And you talk about, that we can have a good hard story, which is one of my favorite things too, that it can be hard, but it can also be good. And with God in the mix, it can be both at the same time. So how does that work? Because I think so often we're just overwhelmed by the hard.
Yeah. Um, in the moment, we can feel completely overwhelmed by the hard, and I think that's natural, of course. But in time, we can recognize that what remains in the wreckage of our hard stories is good things, that God is still good and there is still goodness here on the other side. I like to say that yes, there is collateral damage, absolutely. But there's also a collateral gift to be found in the darkness. There's collateral treasures in the darkness.
And that is the name of your new book, Treasures in the Dark. You say it's not a
Yes.
devotional, but reflections. And I honestly was telling you before this interview, I could not stop taking notes on this book. There's so many wise and wonderful things.
Thank
Just give us a little
you. Thank
sense.
you.
Yeah, give us a little sense about what people can expect from this book.
Yeah, the book is called Treasures in the Dark 90 Reflections on Finding Bright Hope Hidden in the Hurting. And basically, it's devotionals, but I like to call them reflections, where it's a little vignette from my life or my specific story with some universal teaching on how is that so? Things like I'm learning that what is true in the light is true in the dark as well. Or I'm learning, as I shared before, that you don't stay in that place of deep grief and letting the story break your heart, but you must start there to move forward. And just little truths that I think are so important as a believer.
You talk about how at the camp that you started, you look at the stars and you can only see the stars in the darkness. What is some of the bright hope that you found personally in the hurting you've experienced?
Well, I love that you mentioned our camp, because at that beautiful camp, McDowell, that's where you can see the stars so vividly in the night sky because it's not polluted by city air. And that camp, those people that come to our camp, those families with disabilities, those are one of the many, many treasures that I've found in the darkness. It's just a community of suffering souls, of hurting hearts who are doing life even though it's not anything like what they ever imagined it would be.
Yeah, you say that, suffering tends to isolate us. So sometimes we want to go into our cave, and just kind of suffer quietly. What is the benefit of being part of what you call a suffering community?
Oh, goodness. There's so many benefits to suffering together. Neuroscience has proven that when we hold things together, we think about them differently. That when we tell our story to an empathetic listener, it changes our brains and changes how we feel about our story. So there is just tremendous value in that corporate telling and retelling and processing together story that God is writing. There are tremendous benefits to not feeling alone. I like to say it's one of those treasures in the book, actually, that we can bear our suffering when we share our suffering. That it's really hard to do it alone, but when we do it together, we can endure.
I love your camp so much, and I know that there's opportunities for people to volunteer. If they were interested in volunteering to be part of that, that would be hopehealscamp.com, correct?
Yes,
And you
absolutely.
say there's a bizarre freedom about the camp because nobody's pretending they're okay. Can you unpack that a little bit?
Absolutely. It is so incredibly freeing. It's like, finally, I can be myself. I'm not trying anymore. Someone described Hope Hills Camp as a place without ego. And what a glorious place that is, that nobody's trying to pretend everything's perfect. It's clearly not perfect. So that frees you up to just enjoy a space to be, to live in freedom there. It's glorious.
Oh, it just sounds so wonderful. Practicing for heaven, I've heard you call it, and I love it.
Yes, absolutely. Practicing heaven together.
In 2017, you were in the hospital for 5 days with, now I'm not know if I'm going to say this right, vertebral artery dissections.
Right, vertebral artery dissection. Absolutely.
Okay,
Yep.
so you weren't drugged up. You couldn't do anything. There was no entertainment to be had. And you say you began the invisible and intense work of telling your own story to yourself. Talk to me a little bit about how we narrate our lives to ourselves and what the story was you were telling you during that time.
There's so much importance to be placed on remembering the correct story. The loudest voice we hear is the voice in our own head telling us what's happening to us. So we got to be sure that we are believing the right story. And as a Christ follower, we are putting the Christ lens on our story and telling it to our own head and heart. And obviously, the story for all of us is a story of gratitude, of there is so much here. What's here now is so much. It's so rich. It's so beautiful. We just got to look for it.
Your counselor told you that you can, when you love who you've become because of the suffering, you can feel a little bit more bearable what you're going through. And how does that impact you? And what advice would you have for people, who are going through suffering? Maybe they can't see the good stuff yet.
Yeah. I'm nearly 17 years post-stroke. So I've had many years of processing. So it's not as if I woke up a few days after and thought these thoughts. But I do. I love who I've become because of where I've been. And I think we all have the opportunity in all of life's tragedies to look back, way back sometimes, and recognize that we love who we've become because of what happened.
Somebody who's in that, dark season right now, like those 5 years that you had where they're lamenting the loss of what they hope their life could be, or maybe it's for someone they love, maybe it's a child or a spouse. What can they do today? What would be your advice to them to do today to help give them some light in the midst of that darkness? Not necessarily, get to where you are, but just to be able to wake up another day and say, okay, maybe things will be different in the future.
Well, I have a lot of advice. The number one advice when you're going through the ringer is to keep in mind it will not always feel like it does today. That is actually a very important, comforting thought when you're in the midst of something that feels unsurvivable. It's not going to always feel this way. And that may mean you get a miraculous healing, or maybe you don't, but it's not going to feel the way it does every day of your life. And I think that is the comfort of time passing, and that's been a comfort to me, that the page will turn and our lives are beautiful stories that God is writing, I believe. And there's many chapters within a good story, and you'll be in a different chapter one day soon. Hold on.
Katherine, you are a beautiful chapter in the story of so many people's lives. And I just want to say thanks on behalf of so many people that will never meet you for being a voice of hope, for bringing fresh perspective, for showing us that even in the hard places of life, there can be beauty. Like, you really are a gift. And I just want to say thank you so much.
Oh my word, you are so kind. And side note, you were such a great interviewer. Every time you've interviewed me, you have such thoughtful questions, and you've obviously always really done your homework, which is not always the case. And you are clearly just a very thoughtful believer, really importantly, accurately processing the important questions for other Christians.
Thank you so much. You're a sweetheart. And, you know, I'm thinking of that person that is in that dark time. Maybe I pray you found inspiration in this interview. And I always think of that phrase. It stays with me all the time. Your today is not your forever. What Katherine said, there's another chapter of your life to come. And I just want to encourage you, you know, if you don't even have words right now to pray, if you can't even see the smallest bit of light in your future, let us pray for you. Let us have the faith to talk to God on your behalf. We can find the words that you can't find right now. And hey, we just want to encourage you, and we just want to hold you up. And as Katherine said, we cannot do this alone. We need each other. Give us a call, 1-866-273-4444, or just drop us an email at prayer@crossroads.ca. We will pray for that prayer request. And you never know what will happen if you just open that door and give God a chance. Katherine Wolf, you are a blessing. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Oh, thank you. It was a joy to be here. God bless y'all.